Hey, I'm Nick, and in this video, you're going to hear from Nils Smith, who I think is one of the top leaders when it comes to churches and social media. Nils has created great content around this. He has courses, free content, and in this video, we talk all about a strategy for social media. For example, how churches can leverage Facebook and how Facebook isn't just about pages, it also has groups and your personal profile and even Facebook Messenger. Ideas for how churches can use Facebook Messenger because it has an 80 something percent open rate compared to email that has a 20, maybe 30% open rate. So in this video, you're going to hear Nils talk about all of that, key strategies, kind of higher level, and tactics like in the weeds for how our churches can use social media better. Now, this interview is bonus content related to a course called The New Digital Church. If you're interested in that, check out newdigitalchurch.com. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you want to see the other videos like this, the other free videos in this series. And if this is helpful to you, go ahead and hit that like button. Well, hey everybody, Nick Blevins here, and I'm talking with Nils Smith. Welcome, Nils.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the 50,000 things you do that we were just talking about before you hit record. What are you about and what do you do?
Yeah. So, first I'm a dad and a husband, and a Jesus follower. So we live here in New York City. I've got two daughters, a 10-year-old and 8-year-old, and been married 15 years. We've got a Hillsong Church is our home church here in the city. And, but kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis, my primary job is with a company called Dunham and Company, where I'm the chief strategist of social media and innovation for them. And they work, they've got a Dallas and a Sydney, Australia office working with some incredible ministries around the world, helping around fundraising and marketing. My wife and I run a social media marketing agency here in the city. We've got an incredible team that's distributed worldwide. And then, we're a number of other hats, some consulting, some, a little bit in healthcare, a little bit in virtual reality, a little bit in cryptocurrency. And so I love new things. I love new technology. And maybe to give you a little background on how I got into this role about 10 years ago, and I'd been a youth pastor for about 10 years. I was invited by Community Bible Church in San Antonio to be a social media pastor. And that was a new thing. This was early days of that new website called Facebook.com that kind of caught on a little bit. And everybody said we were nuts, and we were kind of, and I luckily had a pastor that was nuts, that was willing to try anything. And we built a church on the internet. We bought onlinechurch.com, and we saw a lot of success, ministry success. And then I met a guy named Nick Vujicic. He was my first client. He has a ministry called Life Without Limbs, and asked me to run his social media, and got to go on an incredible ride with him. Continue. He's still a client and a ministry that I'm serving on a daily basis. And just God's given me some incredible opportunities to help a lot of different churches, a lot of different ministries, a lot of different technology companies. And we're having a good time. Every day is a new day and exciting new opportunity.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about cryptocurrency in the church. No, I'm just kidding.
I love having that conversation because I think cryptocurrency is the future of money, but
it probably is. It would help
down the road.
Yeah, it'd be great if it was. No, I wanted to talk social media. I'd love to talk about all those things, but I thought we'd talk social media. And I think it's really cool that you were involved with online church, back in the day, not that far ago. And now it's so prevalent and so many more churches are obviously doing that. But just starting with social media, what are some of the big things you'd recommend to churches? Because I'm sure we're getting a lot of it wrong in some ways. So what can we do there to leverage social media better?
Yeah, a couple of even key mistakes that I see churches making is one, the mistake of trying to be everywhere. What we used to do in the world of social media is we'd set up a MySpace account, a Facebook account, a Twitter account, and we set up a Hootsuite account, and we just post everything everywhere. Well, the reality is Facebook is different from Twitter, which is different from Instagram, which is different from TikTok. And you can't be everywhere. You don't have enough time. I work with some of the largest churches in the world, and they don't have enough resources. And so I know that no church really has enough resources to fully be present everywhere. And so it's, I think it's really finding where are the people that you're wanting to reach, and pick 2 or 3 platforms and dig in. And that's probably Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. if I were to kind of predict where you are. And then maybe your youth pastor is on TikTok, or maybe your youth pastor's
Hmm.
on Snapchat, or maybe your women's pastors on Pinterest. But I think you've got to kind of find some niches and lean into those networks and how you're going to engage your community and your potential community in that way. And then I think the other big mistake that I see churches make is seeing social media as a marketing platform and seeing social media as a communications platform. And while it might be your communications director that's managing it, it is a ministry platform. And the churches that are using it most effectively are using it for ministry. And they're accomplishing their goals. They're doing evangelism on social media. They're doing discipleship on social media. They're doing fellowship on social media. But what I see the mistake church is making is, let's just put our men's event on social media. Let's just put our upcoming sermon series on social media. Let's just put our whatever the announcement is, and it's as if you have church and you just have an hour's worth of announcements and maybe a 2-minute sermon. And that doesn't work, so using it as a ministry platform is the best thing that I think churches can do. And then I think with that is leaning into video. I think churches have gotten left behind, a lot of them not prioritizing video. And video content is core to every single social network now. And the smallest church needs to be using video, and the largest churches need to be using video. And the great news is we all have a video camera in our pockets. And so there's no excuses. But I think those are kind of the key things, and leaning into video, using it as a ministry platform, and picking the right platforms to focus on, and being willing to leave platforms. You could still be on MySpace right now. We've got to abandon platforms that are declining. And Twitter, I keep recommending. Twitter's my favorite personal social network, but it's not the best place for most churches and ministries to be spending their time and investing their resources. And so you've got to focus your time and energy.
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple questions coming out of that. I'm wondering, I think a lot of churches are starting to get the idea that, social media shouldn't just be the billboard or the megaphone and just the announcements and things like that. So they're starting to make it a little bit more social, although I think we have a lot of room to grow there. But the other thing I think that is probably totally new is the idea of ministry through social media. And you mentioned a little bit of that. What are some examples or ideas that churches could take and do on social media that would be more like social ministry than just billboard announcements?
100%. I mean, I think this is where sermon clips, I think it starts with the pulpit, and get the most. I mean, your pastor is putting so much into that sermon. It can be used for more than just that 30 minutes on a Sunday. It can be used with a 3-minute video clip on Facebook, and a 30-second clip on Instagram, or however you want to mix that up. Take that sermon and make the most of it. I think is the first place to start, is really kind of creating that micro content. And what I think we'll sometimes do is just put the whole sermon. We just leave the Facebook Live up on Facebook. But the average consumer on Facebook is watching a video for less than 30 seconds. So you've got to think in micro chunks of how can I minister to somebody in 30 seconds? Now, some of that's creating unique content that's just for Facebook, that's straight to the camera, that's maybe shot with your phone, and connecting in that way. One of the things that we saw, this was 10 years ago, and I'm continuing to see still today with a lot of the ministers I work with, is one of the most engaging posts is no image, no video. It's just a text post that says, how can we pray for you today? And we used to do that once a week at Community Bible Church, and that was always our most engaged post every week. And what we found is we weren't really we just started the conversation, and then people would post prayer requests, and then our church members and community were responding with prayer, and it was community that was formed around that. And so I think it's, if we just put our creativity together, and understanding that social media is social, and so it's two ways. And so when you stir a conversation, that allows community to be developed. And so it's not just a broadcast channel for video content, it's videos that stir a conversation, or it's questions, or it's behind the scenes kind of stuff. I think there's so many different opportunities for us to create those ministry moments.
Well, you kind of got to my second question with that micro content strategy and taking the sermon and putting that here. Because what I wanted to ask was, different social media platforms are different, and so you want to engage differently there. Would you recommend like creating unique video content for each one because they are different?
Yeah.
or taking the sermon and then, because there is a lot of value to be able to take something already done, like a sermon, chopping that up, getting 10 pieces of content out of it?
Yes.
Or would you do both? Like do that, and then if you have the time, start doing custom that's just for Instagram stories. We literally recorded that just for, you know what I mean? Like, would you
Yes.
recommend both?
The more you can customize, the better. And there's everybody has capacity issues. And so you've got to figure out where you're going to get the most, and your most valuable resource is time. And so you've got to figure out where can you get the most bang for your buck when it comes to your time investment or your staff's investment or your volunteers investment. And so it's kind of figuring out where you get the most engagement as well. And so I think that's where you've got to determine if it's worth it. But I do absolutely think that if you can create unique content for each platform. Now, a lot of churches that are still on Twitter, I've just told them, just repurpose your Facebook content to Twitter and let it be what it is. Or, just, it's not worth creating that much, custom content for that kind of platform. But Instagram, a platform that's skyrocketing and has continued to over the last 2 years, it's worth investing, unique custom content. Right now, as they've just introduced Reels, like going and figuring out what kind of unique content with IGTV. I mean, I think too, vertical video, when you posted horizontal video early on, it really felt like a disconnect. I think it still feels like a disconnect, but really thinking through native content to each platform, because it feels like this was created for me right here, when it was like, oh, this was created for YouTube, and they just threw it up on here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know one of the things that I've loved learning from you is some stuff about Facebook and how churches could better use that, all the other features. And you even break it down and to hear the different things, aspects of Facebook,
Yeah.
whereas a lot of times we just think about a page, maybe a group, those are certainly getting used more by churches, but there's other pieces to that too. So how can we use Facebook better considering, I mean, what is it, 2 billion people were there, something like that, something
Yeah.
crazy like that?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook is still king, and I think Instagram has so much attention that we'll often abandon Facebook. And I think it also depends on who it is you're reaching, who's your core community, who's your target. And I think that's the reality of, it's kind of an under 40 is going to be more engaged on Instagram, and over 50 is going to be more engaged on Facebook. And those of us that are in between those ages kind of flip flop. And so it's and that's a general statement. That's not always necessarily the case, but you've got 3 core platforms on Facebook. And Instagram is pretty simple in what you can do, and it's that content of the photos, the images, the IGTV. But Facebook has different kind of community elements and aspects of. You've got your Facebook page, which is your public profile, where basically it's Nona Jones often describes it as your front porch, and so that's where people are driving by and they're seeing you, and so that's where people, your church members are sharing your content, or they're somebody's checking out your church online and they see your Facebook page. It's a first impression. But then you have Facebook groups, and this is where Facebook has invested so much of their energy over the last, probably 3 or 4 years. I even see, here in Times Square, they've got big, billboards up for Facebook groups. Facebook is wanting people to move into this. And I'm seeing that you get 5 to 10 times more engagement with your content organically with a Facebook group than a Facebook page. And so that Facebook group is made for community. And so when you think about your church, and even the way it's structured, is you generally would just have one Facebook page for your church, and then you would have maybe 10 Facebook groups. And so a Facebook group can be your men's ministry group, your choir group, your parents of youth group. And it can get as small as your every single small group having a Facebook group. I talked to Elevation Church the other day, and I think they have over 1,000 Facebook groups. And it's amazing what they're doing in every area, and they've got all these kind of micro churches all over the country, and every single one of them uses a Facebook group because it's a powerful tool, and there's so much you can do with it. I think it's fascinating too what you can now do with these Facebook Messenger rooms, I think they're calling it, with video conferencing up to 50 people. But then I think that the really powerful tool that I found, that I think so many organizations really, but really ministries have missed out on, is Messenger. Messenger has an over 80% open rate, and if you compare that to email has an average of 20% open rate. And the only other thing I've seen that comparable to is text messaging, which has about a 97% open rate. And so when you think about getting your content directly to people, Messenger is a powerful tool to do that. But Facebook does limit how you can use that. And so they give you a 24-hour window as to when you can respond to people within a certain message is sent to your Facebook page. So one, you've got to be very responsive when you get messages, but it also allows you, the messenger bot allows you a lot of automation. And so you can literally use a bot of anybody who comments on any post on your page. You can send them a message of thank you for the comment. Is there anything else we can help you with? And it kind of gives them a choose your own adventure. Or if they comment prayer, you can send them a message of, hey, we saw that you mentioned prayer. Can our prayer team pray for you? And it can automatically, get their prayer request and send that to your prayer team. So there's all kinds of these automations, and it feels so complex, but it's really not. And so the way I see it from a structural standpoint is you've got your page as your front porch, and you've got your groups as your living room where community happens, and your messenger bot is your bridge to so you've got your page as that front porch, and then it bridges you into these living room settings or into these different rooms. So maybe even if you give it the house analogy, it's your hallways that connect the different rooms. But it really, I think, as utilizing those three things, that we either get focused on just Facebook groups or just our Facebook profile, which is our personal platform. But there's all these different functions and kind of platforms within Facebook, and utilizing all of them is how I think we fully maximize it. And I think the last piece is our Facebook profile, because ministry is done person to person. And so we're using our page to engage profiles. We're using our page to engage that's Facebook language, but we're using our page, our front porch, to engage people. And then we're using our groups to engage them in community. And then we're using our messenger bot to help them find the right points of connection. And then we use our profile to build relationships. And I think that's at the core of when you're doing ministry, it's person to person is the deepest level. So I think we build kind of scale systems within our different, platforms. But I think we can't forget that we're doing person to person ministry, and all of us need to be focused on that and be prioritizing that.
Yeah, and I remember when I heard you teach about using your personal profiles, I thought, well, yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because Facebook cares probably almost most, or certainly a lot, about what you actually personally share and like and all those things.
For sure.
And I remember when we were sharing some kids content online, my elementary director was remarking how that one post of hers really got a lot of traction. And we went back and looked. It was like, oh, you shared it on your personal profile. So of course it did. You know what I mean? Compared to this one over here that was just from the page. And you've probably seen this too. I don't know who it was recently, but they kind of made a joke that like pages are almost becoming like yellow pages, like dead.
Yep.
And I know for us, in some ways they are, because you're lucky if you get 10% engagement or looks or whatever on those posts. Groups, very different. Right. And I think you already answered this, but I was going to say, would you recommend every church has a church-wide Facebook group? And as well as those subgroups, you think groups are great and more.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think you can go either way. I think it's helpful to have it just from an organic standpoint. And so the way a lot of churches do is basically get into and you almost create that huge Facebook group as your church lobby online. And so I think there is value in that. The challenge becomes, and this is where I have a bit of empathy for, especially smaller churches, is how many platforms can you manage? If you've got a Facebook page, you've got a Facebook group, and then you're empowering 20 other Facebook groups, and then you've got a messenger bot, I get where that could become overwhelming. So ideally, yes, you have a large Facebook group for your entire church. But you've got to act, it's not just a passive platform that you leave out there dry. You've got to actively engage and post content to your page, to your group, to your groups through Messenger, and even on your profile. And then that's just Facebook. And then we're going to talk about Instagram. Then we're going to talk about YouTube. And then we're going to talk about Twitter. And so it really does become a lot. And so it's just, I think you've got to be smart with your time, and you got to think, where's the best investment?
Yeah. When you said Elevation had 1,000 groups, I was thinking, does somebody have like a Google sheet with all of them in there, or do they not even know? I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's almost like unmanaged in that sense. It's distributed and other people manage it. And
I mean, they've got systems, man. It's incredible getting to know their team, but they also, I mean, I don't know how many ministry leaders come to me and just say, hey, can you just do what Elevation does on our Facebook? And it's like, do you know that Elevation has like 20 people on that team? And the truth is, I love it. And people have looked at like, how did Elevation grow? So, well, they invested in this area. It didn't happen accidentally. If you look back at what Stephen Furtick was doing as a leader 10, 12 years ago, he was setting a foundation and investing in these areas back then. And I think people thought he was crazy. And now it's kind of like, wow, he bet on the right area, and
Yeah.
put his investment there and continues to. So it's not accidental what's happening there. But it's also not one person behind a keyboard. They're putting a ton of resources behind it that isn't feasible for other churches just to replicate.
Yeah, and they've also built up. Don't know much about it, but I have a friend who lives in Texas, has a church there, and
Yeah.
loves what Elevation does online. Is like an Elevation, a small group leader online
Yeah.
or host or something like
Yeah.
that. He's been there for training. So like
Yeah.
if you count him, I don't even know how many other volunteers are like him. So
Yeah.
they've been able to build that too,
Yep.
in a big way, which is awesome.
It
What
is
if
awesome.
we shift gears to talk about other social media platforms? What are
Yeah.
like some of the same kinds of principles that we just talked about with Facebook and how to actually do ministry through it and cultivate relationships that you would apply to some other platforms?
Yeah, I mean, so the formula that I use for content across all platforms is I say inspiration, information, conversation, celebration, connection. So those are kind of your 5 pieces, and I'll go through those. Is on every platform as I see it, a minimum of 50% of your content should be inspirational in nature. That means no calls to action. That means that's literally just ministry based content, probably video. So this could be sermon clip. This could be a quote, a prayer. It could be just some kind of ministry engagement platform or piece of content. And then a maximum of 25% of your content should be information. So we need to post information on places. And so we've got to figure out how do we insert that without it just being a big announcement board. And so I think what we often try to do is like wiggle it into an inspirational post as
Yeah.
if people won't notice that it's the marketing push, but what they end up doing is it doesn't feel like either, and it just feels confusing. And so when we're going to tell people about something, just be direct and tell them about it. Make it an announcement, because people do need announcements. They just need it mixed in a balanced way. So minimum of 50% inspirational, a maximum of 25% informational. And then the others is the 3 C's: the conversation, connection, and celebration. So I'll start with celebration. We need to celebrate what's happening in the life of our church. This is celebrating, posting photos from the previous weekend, posting a youth camp celebratory video, posting baptisms that just happened, but celebrating even things that locally, here in New York, the Yankees win the championship, the post about the championship, or local high school football team wins a game, So I think posting things that are important and that your community is going to celebrate. And then on the conversation side, it's very simple. It's asking questions. So finding ways that are going to stir comments and engagement. And I think this can, I mean, you even look at a platform like TikTok. You can create a TikTok that stirs conversation. But I think this really applies to I think core social networks that when you look at things like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook that have basically a standard comment thread. And then the last is connection. I think people want to see behind the scenes a little bit, and using social media to give them a look under the hood. Pastors often tell me nobody cares what I ate for breakfast, and the reality is people care more than pastors want to believe what they ate for breakfast. I want to know. Carl Lentz is my pastor. I'm curious: is he a Fruit Loops guy, or is he a Special K guy? What
Yeah.
I want to know. And I think people genuinely want to know their pastors. They want to know the people that they're seeing on the platform, and they want to know them personally, or they want to know what are some of their unique habits, or I think giving people a personal connection, and even things something like highlighting a volunteers. Like, here's Jim the greeter that you always see at the door. Here's his story, and it creates a level of connection to a person that's kind of visible there in the life of the church.
Yeah, and you can see yourself in some of those people or conversations
Yeah.
or whatever, right? So if you're not that connected, you can
Yes.
start to feel like, oh, this could be a place for me, right? That's a good thing
100%.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it gives you an excuse to go see Jim on Sunday and say, "Hey, I saw that you did this,"
yeah.
and so it provides all kinds of opportunities to connect and just build relationship.
All right, last question here. This one might be a
Yeah.
little bit of a curveball too, but one
Okay.
thing I want my church to think about and other churches to think about is, when people would attend in person at a church, that's not their first step. It's like
Yep.
maybe their 20th step, right?
Yep.
Because nowadays, especially, they've been online,
Yep.
they've watched service, they've seen social media. Now, online, let's say their first step was just visiting the website because they heard about it or they saw something on social media, and
Yep.
then they watch a service. So they're like maybe 4 or 5 steps in. What role do you think social media could play in helping you go from like that, I've looked at a little bit, to I'm actually going to engage a little bit more? Step 5 to 20. How do you think that can help? Because it needs to somehow, right? In person, once they're there, you can help them take more steps.
Yes.
Online, you don't even know they're there when they're on step 5. You want to help them get to step
Yes.
20, whether that's
Yep.
attending in person or regularly attending online or something like that.
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think two things here is one, I think we need to have a clear pathway, and we need to have a clear next step. And so we often, I think our pathway to church historically has been put a billboard out in front of your church, put a church sign out, and then people are going to just show up on Sunday and they pull into the parking lot and they come to church. And then when they're at church, you get them to go to Sunday school, and then once they're going to Sunday school, you ask them to give, and they give, and now that's it, and you join the church. And that was your pathway. Well, it's now I think it's gone from 5 steps to your point to 20 steps. And so I think we've got to think through. We run a Facebook ad boosting a sermon post so that they see the pastor. And then we can literally retarget people who watch that video, who don't yet like our page, to then like our page, or to watch another video, and then we can actually literally retarget that person with a Facebook ad, and I'm walking through very systematic, but um, to then go to our website, and on our website we should be looking to capture an email address. And so even right now, while most people are doing online church, you could do a plan your visit online where you can get that email address and communicate directly with them. So before they've even come to a service, you've now connected with them on social media. You've now, kind of strategically you can retarget them a little bit. You can get them to the website, and then you can get their information. And, I think one of the cool things I see churches doing is having these little chat bots or even chat people on their church website, so that there's somebody there ready to build a connection with them digitally before they come to the service. And then you get their email, and then you send them a reminder on Saturday night. Can't wait to see you online at church tomorrow. And then you send them, a message of the service. They send a message, Sunday afternoon. How'd service go? Anything we can do to help you get connected? And then if they get connected, here's how you can get connected in a small group. Here's some other opportunities within the life of the church. And you just keep deepening that engagement. And this is what we've always done in the life of the church is, how can we move people to the deepest level of engagement with our church, which essentially means, ideally, if we're a healthy church, that they're being discipled, that they're in deeper community with each other, that they are learning their spiritual gifts, they're using their gifts, they're serving, they're giving, they're in community, they're meeting the needs in the community. So I think it's being very intentional with what that path is, and understanding that what has historically been steps are now micro steps, and really being thoughtful as to what that pathway is, and how social media aligns with your website, which aligns with text messaging and email, and your database system. And it gets complex, but I think it's a real intentionality of having a clear pathway, and being smart about how you're using this content to move people to their deepest level of engagement with your church.
Yeah, definitely. How can people connect with you, get help, your course, all those things
Yeah.
I know have been really helpful. So point us to some of that.
Yeah, so nilssmith.com is my website. At Nils Smith on all the social networks is where you'll find me online. Socialmedia.church is the podcast that I run, helping church leaders lean into social media. And then I've got a course for church leaders on my website. So if you just look for that on the homepage of my website, it's called Grow Your Church with Social Media, and just trying to help church leaders grow their churches using social media. So would love to connect on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you're engaged on social media, and help however I can.
Cool. Well, thank you for this time. I love what you're doing. You're like thinking ahead and helping churches. And I feel like we're trying to catch up like most churches.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of opportunity here. So I'm excited about it. I appreciate you sharing time with us.
appreciate it.